A mid block is an extremely effective strategy that many teams use at the top of the game, and we're going to learn about how a mid block actually works and understand the principles so that when we effectively use a mid block, we close central spaces and dictate the play without the ball. So if we analyze the way that this game is going so far, we can see that when PSG are setting up in this shape, they've closed off all the space in the middle and Arsenal to set up around that area. So Arsenal cannot play the passes into the middle of the pitch where they want to play, and then having to keep rotating and playing the ball from left to right, from left to right. And that's not really what they want to do, because all their players are good players are going to be in the middle of the pitch. So PSG effectively continue to push Arsenal back, push Arsenal out wide. And even when Arsenal get the ball in the middle of the pitch, like these areas, PSG regroup and then push them out wide again. And here you can see that PSG win the ball. But then again, when Arsenal get the ball back, PSG again in their shape, nice and compact. And even when Arsenal have players in the middle of the pitch, as you can see in the screen, PSG are very effective at closing their space and again forcing Arsenal out wide. Arsenal have to continue to move left, right, and when they get out wide, there's no space, they have to go back. So it's a really, really effective strategy to control where the opposition team plays. And it's not always going to work. There's going to be teams that are able to break through, and Arsenal break through multiple times during the game. But the principle of it is that you're trying to slow the game down and trying to focus the opposition on a certain area of the pitch so that you can understand pressing triggers and then try and win the ball back. So in this video, we're going to go over the principles of the mid block on the tactics board so that we can understand that even when it fails in some way, how can we operate in our mid block and make sure that the other team doesn't get a goal, because we're trying to limit the chances of them getting a goal so we can win the ball back and go and score a goal instead. So when we want to defend without the ball as a team, there are different types of areas of the pitch that we can focus our defense on. So if we want to sit really, really deep, this would be called a low block. In the middle of the pitch with the midfield area, if we sit here, this would be a mid block. And if we want to push up really, really high and be a bit more brave, it would be called a high block. So in this video, we're going to focus on a mid block, but some of the principles of mid blocks, low blocks, high blocks will apply to each other, but we'll go over that in different videos. So the two yellow spaces are called the wide spaces, and this is the area of the pitch where like wingers might be, and the black spaces are called the half spaces, and these are a bit more technical, but we'll get into that after. And the blue space is called the central space. Now, as you can see, as our team is set up, the goal of a mid block is to stay within the half space and the central space so that we can really congest this area of the pitch. And now mind the gaps in the middle. There are no gaps in the spaces. I've just done it to make sure the colors are a bit more separate, but in reality, it will be nice and tight like this, so we can minimize the space available in the half space and the central space. So thinking behind this is that if an opposition player is out wide, there's less chance of them doing something against us that can score. But if they are in the central spaces or in the half spaces, especially very close to the goal, there's more chance of them scoring a goal. So that's the reason why when we defend in the mid block or defend in any sort of block, we want to limit the space in the middle of the pitch. So the formation doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be a 4-4-2. It could even be something like maybe a 5-3-2. It could be something like a 5-4-1. It could even be like a 3-5-2 as well. So we'd have the five midfielders on the wing backs, maybe a bit wider, and we have the three defenders. So the formation doesn't actually matter. But for the video, we're going to talk about it through a 4-4-2 because it's going to make the easiest for me to do. And so the key things you have to look out for is we have to maintain compactness in all directions. And so horizontal compactness seems to be quite successful right now, and even vertical compactness seems quite successful. But if we're too flat, it's not really, really effective, because that means that if they get a ball out wide here, there could be a lot of space for these guys to pick up the ball. So we also have to think about something called diagonal compactness. So that means the wingers need to maybe step up a little bit and create more of a staggered shape, and that maintains horizontal compactness, that maintains vertical compactness, but we've also got diagonal compactness. So all these types of compactness and the area of the pitch we're in are very, very important. So we have to make sure that we cover the half spaces and the central space, maintain diagonal compactness as well as horizontal and vertical compactness to really tighten up that space of the pitch. So now if we bring this into a more game-like scenario, what we're really going to find is that now that teams know we're trying to compact that space, they're going to play out wide. And this means that we are sometimes going to be put into a bit of trouble because we have to go and shift. But again, this is why mid block is so important, especially with formations like the 4-4-2, because it allows us to transport all over the pitch. Now, even though we still want to cover the half spaces suddenly aren't these areas anymore. The half spaces have shifted because the game has shifted. We're not playing the game in the whole pitch, we're now playing the game in this area, really. Because these players here aren't as important, because once they get the ball, we can shift over here. So now the game has shrunk, and so the half spaces are no longer the same space as they were when we played the full size pitch. So even now the principles still apply, because we are still trying to tighten up that space and players can't get into these positions. So don't worry about thinking, oh, what happens if the ball goes up wide? That's when we shift over, maintain that compactness, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. And that means that these guys can't play through the middle. Obviously, they're going to be a bit more strategic. They're not going to stand that far off. But we've compacted the middle so much, so these guys are going to have to play around us. And we shift, maintaining that compactness. Right, and what we're doing is the same. You can play around us, but you can't penetrate through. Right, and penetration is an attacking principle. Penetration is so important. So the white team will want to penetrate the middle, but you can't score from here. But once you're in these situations, that's where we're really thinking about getting goals. So what we're doing is we're delaying. Right, so again, we're going to really focus on defensive principles. We're delaying so that when we want to, we're dictating the game really. So when these guys get the ball, we're delaying, covering, balancing each other, making the ball go out wide. Then we're shifting again, maintaining our mid block in this area of the pitch. Then they might want to play out wide. We shift again. Obviously, we're not going to go that slow, but then going to shift and shift. So you get the idea. So we're shifting constantly, making them play around us. Now, in actual fact, what's going to happen is you're going to have teams that play the ball very, very fast, and there's going to be little pockets that open up where they can maybe play into the middle. Because it is football, you're not going to have a perfect game plan. But that's what the principle of this is. We really want to maintain that compact shape in the middle. And now the last couple of things I want to go over is that you're not going to be in this sort of phase of play the whole time. You're not always just going to start from kickoff and be immediately in this shape. So you'll have to know certain triggers and certain moments of when to get in this shape. So you might be in a situation like this where there's a goal kick. And so what we have to do is learn how to transition in and out of a mid block. So you're not going to be doing a mid block here. If anything, you're going to be more of a higher block, especially if you keep those principles. You're going to be defending nice and compact, high up the pitch. But typically what happens in these situations that you want to do more of a man-to-man, but that isn't for this video. So what's going to happen is that the game's going to progress from here. They might start playing at the back, and they might be successful, might not be successful. But what we're really trying to go for here is that there's going to be a certain period of time when the game becomes more settled. So let's say these guys play the ball up the pitch, play progresses, maybe the striker wins a header, midfielder gets the ball, you guys come back. Right, and slowly what's going to happen is the ball is going to progress into this sort of situation. So as a team, whether it's like you're coaching, you're a midfielder, attacker, winger, whatever, you have to recognize that this situation now means you have to revert back into our mid block. Okay, so starting from goal kick, we've pressed high, maybe we haven't pressed high, whatever your tactics are. But now the game is in this sort of area, we have to recognize that and close off the space. Because if we are still keeping the mentality from this situation or any other situation, it could be a corner, throw in, set piece, whatever that situation is. Once they get into the areas where they can hurt us, that's when we have to go back to our mid block. So we recognize that, then we've come nice and compact, keeping our shape, making sure we're horizontally compact, vertically compact, diagonally compact, and that means that he's not going to find any solutions here. They have to come back. Play is going to become more settled, and slowly we can dictate the play again. We're dictating the play without the ball. And the same thing could happen when we're attacking. We might lose the ball. Maybe I'm not going to shift everyone again. We might lose the ball. They might get it. They might try and counter attack. And our goal then again is to delay. So that's why if you go look at the defensive principles video, something I said is that let's say the counter attacking, you get into a 1v1 situation, and we're going to imagine that your team's not in shape. That's why delaying is so important, because you have to keep this winger here for as long as you can so that your team can get back into your shape. Then you can show them back to the left back, make sure he can't come past you. Now you're suddenly in that compact shape where it's very, very hard to break it down. So this is just an introduction to mid blocks, but we're really going to try and just develop an understanding of how to defend in this sort of shape. And a lot of the principles that we went over here will sort of apply for high blocks and low blocks, but we're going to get into that in another video. So thank you for watching. Leave any feedback in the comments down below, and we'll see you in next week's video.